I think if I'm gonna try to remember exactly how many times it was used, but it was used 3 different ways. It was used 216 times as Yahusha. It was spelled Yahushua twice, and I think it was at least once spelled Yeshua, like a shorter form, like a Yod and then Shua. And that's fine too. I have no issue with any of those spellings as transliterations, but because it is used in Scripture. So you've got all these different variations in Scripture itself, in the Hebrew, which are like taking the name Michael and shortening it to Mike. Well, everybody knows Mike is okay but they also should understand that it stands for Michael, and Gregory is the long form of Greg, but if somebody says Yeshua, they shouldn't have no one should be giving them any trouble because, that's in Scripture. But they shouldn't argue and say it's only Yeshua because they should accept the fact that Yeshua is a short form of Yahusha or Yahushua. All of these things are in the Scriptures, And the reason that we know that is because the Messiah, the one that came in that name, had the very same name as the successor of Moshe or Moses that they call Joshua. He had the same name as that man. And that is evidenced by Hebrews chapter 4 and Acts chapter 7. When Stephen is giving his dissertation to the Sanhedrin, he mentions the name of the Messiah. He also mentions the name of the successor of Moshe. Now, the name that's written in the King James is Joshua, but they translate the thing, or transliterate it as Joshua in certain texts when it refers to the successor of Moshe, and then they transliterate it differently when they're using reference to Yahusha. Except underlying that in the Greek are the same letters. So the Greek letters are the same, but the translators decided that they didn't want to use the same name when they transliterated it. So that's kind of a terrible thing to do, because it tricks people. They think that the spelling is, even though it's the same in the Greek, they want to trick you and change it in the English, or the Latin. So anyway, backpedaling a little bit, we have the name Yahuwah contained in the name Yahusha, and I want to try to help people visualize something in their minds. The letter that is the third letter in the name that's so controversial that people transliterate as a W is not a W, because there's no W in Hebrew, because the letter W and the letter U and the letter V are all really one letter, because when the third letter of the Hebrew, which we call, a lot of people call a Wa, which I call an Ua, is equivalent to our U. And you can hear it in the phrase Hallelujah. It's right there. That's the same letter. And it's shaped in the original Hebrew as a Y, as what we call a Y. Now, going into Greek, that became an upsilon.
What does that mean?
Upsilon is a letter. It's the Greek letter U, and it's shaped exactly the same as it is in the Paleo-Hebrew, like our letter Y. It's shaped like a Y, but it isn't a Y. It's shaped like a Y. Now, when that letter went into the Greek, it became the upsilon, which is the equivalent of a U. Now, when it went into the Latin, the stem, the lower stem of the Y shape, was taken away, and it became shaped like a V. That's why in the 17 and 1800s you'll see Latin words carved in stones, and you'll see the V there being used as a U. That's because the original shape of the letter V was not our modern V. It was actually a U. And when they refer to a W, they're actually referring to this same shape, the V shape, only it's doubled. And that became used in the 13th century. Now, how odd is it that the Jewish Encyclopedia has decided to say that the best transliteration of the name of the Creator is Yahweh, with a W when the letter W doesn't even exist in the Hebrew. It's not even there. So these are the kinds of research that I had to do to get to the truth.
When do people use the word Yahweh then? Are they referring to God? Are they referring to who they think is Jesus?
No, Yahuwah or Yahweh is the spirit that is from everlasting to everlasting. He's outside time. He exists in everlasting in the past. He didn't have a beginning. He exists in the present, and he's already in the future. In other words, he's everywhere. He's omnipresent, omnitemporal, omnipotent.
So it's what we would normally refer to or think about as God, but it's not right. G-O-D.
That's right. We wouldn't want to call him G-O-D, but that's what people refer to when they say that. Yeah.
Okay, but when we use the word Yahweh now, since there was no W in Hebrew, right?
Right. There isn't a W in Hebrew. That's a W.
So what do the Hebrews refer to as G-O-D? Is that the Elohim?
Okay. If you went up to an Orthodox rabbi who is a Talmud studier and a Torah studier, he would, if he's really honest with you and he was willing to break the rules of the Talmud, he would actually tell you that the name is pronounced Yahuwah. He knows this because they know their language and they study it. But it isn't every rabbi that would do that. But some of them have acknowledged that the real name is Yahuwah, and it is not a W because the letter W didn't exist. It's two V shapes is what it is, and the V shape originally was a stemless Y-shaped letter that came from Paleo-Hebrew, went into the Greek upsilon, then it became the Latin U, shaped like a V, and of course it was doubled in the 13th century, and that's the real pathway for that letter.
So when you pray, do you ever pray and speak the name of Yahuwah?
Yes, I do.
So do you say in the name of Yahuwah, HaMashiach, or just Yahuwah?
Well, now that's a great question because, see, the Trinitarian...
Stick around, I got more.
I know. This leads us into other things because, you see, the idea of a Trinity is coming from all kinds of pagan sources, but it's not something and it was folded over into Christianity, of course, because Christianity was adopting and adapting the Messiah into their previously existing religion, basically. And if people insist upon the Trinity as being a divisive thing, then they have to basically... I don't want to be contentious with anyone that believes it because there is not really a Trinity.
From what I'm reading in your book and from what you're saying, Jesus as a reference in that name doesn't exist. It's a made-up name.
Oh, yeah.
So how many people pray in Jesus' name?
Well, they've been taught that, and they're not really responsible until they hear the truth.
Right.
But as soon as they start getting more truth, then they need to do their own personal investigation. If they're so lazy that they will not do any personal research, but they will just trust what they already understand, and they will not test everything that they've been taught, then they're going to be in some trouble for that. Because when they've been introduced to the truth, that is, if somebody says, "No, you're a little bit off on that. Let me guide you a little bit," they don't want to receive it. See, they just will not receive it. But then some will. They'll say, I do kind of suspect because there's other things that are wrong. Maybe that's wrong too. I want to get right, and maybe a little personal research is going to be necessary. And they can start investigating. Like the letter J didn't exist until around 1530, and then the letter W didn't exist on this earth until around the 1300s. And if somebody says, "No, I think it started to exist in the 7th century," well, okay, if it didn't exist until the 7th century, what's it doing in the Hebrew, So how many Hebrew words can you list quickly that have a letter W in them? None. Or J. There's none.